Our final speaker is Max Richmond. Max is president of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. He's the former staff director of the Senate Special Committee on Aging and a 16-year veteran of Capitol Hill. Max is president and CEO of the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, one of the nation's most influential senior advocacy and education membership organizations. Mr. Richmond, who joined the organization in 1989, also serves as chair of the National Committee's Political Action Board, a nonpartisan committee that endorses candidates for federal office and who take uncompromising stands on social policy legislation that impacts the aging population. The National Committee is well known and national in stature and brings a great deal of gravitas to this discussion, and we are glad to have their president, Max Richmond, with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon. Afternoon. Because of technology, I can tell you that the Medicare premium just came through on this is better than we thought. $99.60. We thought it was going to be $106, so that's good news. And the Part B deductible, that is $162, is going to decrease by $22. Good news. Finally, a little bit of good news after the last couple of days of not such good news. I just met Judy this morning, right? We've never met before. I've heard of her, and I've heard she's a very determined and aggressive promoter of her organization, and now I know that's true. So when I sat down next to her, she said, "Would you like one of our pins?" And I said, "Sure." And after I put it on, she said, "I usually charge $2, but I'm only going to charge you $1 for that." So, that's a pretty good approach, I think. I want to ask the audience, I think most of the people here aren't going to reach retirement age, except for Webb, who works with me, anytime soon. A lot of you are younger folks. How many of you think that Social Security is going to be there when you retire? Well, that's good, because that's unusual. In most audiences that I talk to, the younger people have been brainwashed. All the myths that Nancy talked about Social Security, and that Rich talked about, have really taken hold, and I think they have colored the debate, especially here in Washington in the last few days. It will be there. The facts say it will be there. Some of the rhetoric says it won't, but the facts say that it will be there. As has been pointed out, the program, it will be able to pay everybody every penny they're entitled to, and until the year 2036. And that's just not Max Richmond or Nancy Altman saying it, it's the trustees. The trustees say that. And after that, as has been said, there's a shortfall. We need to deal with that. And that has been dealt with before by the commission that Nancy worked on in the early 80s. It's a dynamic program. It changes. It has changed dramatically since 1935 for the better. So there will be some changes, and that has to happen, so we don't, when we get to 2035, we don't say, "Oh my gosh, we better do something." We need to do something in advance of that. Do we need to do something about Social Security solvency by Thanksgiving? No. That is absolutely absurd. And we know that, and my colleagues here know that, Judy knows that, but there is such a strong movement pushing the narrative towards, we've got to include Social Security, we've got to save money to deal with the deficit, we're going to have to do things to Social Security like raise the retirement age, like change the cost of living adjustment calculation. I want to say something about that in a minute. But we have been trying to, and I thought we had succeeded, taking Social Security off the table. We heard the President say a few months ago, several times, publicly, Social Security is not responsible for this problem, this huge debt and deficit that we're dealing with. Social Security didn't create it. He sent his Director of Office Management Budget out, Jack Lew. Same thing, publicly, at hearings, at speeches. And then all of a sudden, the administration seems to be putting it back on the table. And now, with the latest from the Super Committee in the last 24 hours, it looks like that's on the table. Dramatic changes to Medicare, increasing. We have some good news about Medicare out-of-pocket costs. That's going to turn around pretty quickly if beneficiaries are going to have to come up with $200 billion worth of savings out of what they pay in order to put this deal together. So, you know, every time if I feel good about the way things are going one day, I've gotten used to the fact that the next day I'm not going to feel so good. And that's been the pattern. It's very, very disturbing. What we have done we're the second largest senior group in the country. There's another one, AA something. We're the second largest. We have 3.5 million members and supporters around the country. We're very political. We have a political action committee. We endorse candidates. We have a scorecard. Rich Fiesta's organization does similar things. And that's important because we will let our members know in our scorecard that goes out to every one of them about 6 weeks before the election how their two senators and their representative voted on the issues that are important to them. And that's going to be Social Security and Medicare in a big way this time. And we'll let them know. Now, in advance of that, we're trying to educate members of Congress, and here's how we're doing it. We realized early on, when the Super Committee was formed, that was the string that was attached to the debt deal last summer, a Super Committee. And we realized this was not going to be any ordinary lobbying campaign, just the way we normally do things. We had to do something special, extra effort, and we did. We brought in some world-class organizers to train our activists for this particular endeavor. And we had 35 of them, isn't that right, Webb? We had 35 come in from all over the country, our most active members. We don't have chapters, but we have activists and volunteers. Came into Washington for 2.5 days in the middle of September for training on how to when you go to a town meeting and you ask a congressman a question, they're pretty good often at not answering the question. They'll answer the question they want to answer, not the question that's being asked. But we taught them, as an example, these activists, how to get someone on record, how to get an answer. And they have done that. We have now, after this, we unleashed them. They went all back to their home towns. We have participated, I think, in 41 events since the third week of September. Some of them as part of a coalition with Rich's group and other groups, labor groups. Some that we created, some were town hall meetings that members of Congress were having. By the way, when it was pretty clear early on after the Super Committee was formed that a lot of members of Congress did not want to have town hall meetings. They remember what happened a couple of years ago, and they didn't want a lot of confrontation. So they had, it was pretty clever. They had closed meetings, or they had meetings that you had to pay. You had to pay a fee to get into. And we still managed to get into a number of these meetings with our signs, with our voices, and I think we got an incredible amount of publicity. I know the people on the panel with me have seen some of the clips, and we've been all over the newspapers, and radio and television. And we based our effort on the polling. You mentioned the numbers. We know, we just know in our hearts that the American people, and seniors in particular, don't want to see these programs gutted. But we did a poll to frame this campaign, and we brought in Celinda Lake, very well-known Democratic pollster, and Linda Duval, very well-known, very well-respected Republican pollster, and they did a poll jointly. And we thought that was important because we didn't want Republicans to dismiss this as a Democratic poll. And the numbers, as Judy pointed out, were really revealing. 83% of Democrats don't want to see these programs cut. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid for deficit reduction. 73% of independents, and even 58% of Republicans. Even with the Tea Party folks, the numbers are 46% against cutting and 43% for. This is the most conservative electorate that's out there, and they're still on the same side, the majority of them, as we are, as Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. So we are now getting all of this information out to members of Congress. We want as Rich said, about only 20% of Congress seems to be, at least today, with us, but 80% of the American people are with us, and a huge majority of seniors. And if it's anything Democrats should have learned in the last few years is seniors vote. And if you're back when the Affordable Care Act was passed, a lot of Democrats that voted for that lost their seats because the message was effectively put out there that this program is bad for seniors. It takes money out of Medicare. Well, just the reason, one of the comments that I started making about the premium and the deductible going down, the premium barely going up at all, that's because of the Affordable Care Act. That makes it possible, but we didn't get that message out effectively. So now we are trying to make our case as best as we can through our polling, briefings with our poll, through our field operation, and a massive media campaign, bigger than anything we've ever done. I don't know if you've heard our ad on WTOP. It's been on drive time the last 2 weeks, on WHUR here. It's a very strong message. The message is no cuts, hands off, no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And that has been, now we have modified that ad a little bit, and we'll start running in the districts of members of the super committee next week in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in Massachusetts. Now, you know, some of our usual friends may not like that, but they're very respectful ads, but very strong ads. Hands off, no cuts. We have a television ad that started airing Sunday. It was on all of the network talk shows on Sunday morning. Meet the Press, Face the Nation. It's on Fox. It's been on, I've seen it several times last night on MSNBC, CNN, and it's the same message, hands off, no cuts. So we're doing everything that we can, devoting more resources than we ever have on anything like this. And I'm going to stop with going back to one point I really think is important, and that's this chain CPI that has been talked about. I think it's a very, it's a sneaky way of cutting Social Security. We're not going to, the message is we're not cutting Social Security, we're going to make the COLA more accurate. And by the way, you're going to get less of a COLA. And I floated this, I was in Montana speaking to the Montana Governor's Conference on Aging about 3 weeks ago, and I talked about the chain CPI. And I told the audience, there were about 300 people, and I talked about it in a television interview beforehand. This is, by the way, the state that Senator Baucus, chairman of the Finance Committee, super committee member, represents. And I told the audience, television and the audience at the conference, You didn't get a COLA in 2010. You didn't get a COLA in 2011. And there are people in Washington talking about having a new way to set what the COLA is, that if it had been in place would have told you that zero that you got was too much. And they laugh. That's ridiculous. They laugh. And then when I try to explain the way the change CPI, I don't know how many of you know how that works, but it's complicated, but just to make it quick and simple, it's based on the idea of substitution. In other words, if the price of something, certain thing goes up, product or service, rather than measure the increase from the third quarter of one year to the third quarter of the next. Now, if you have any detailed question, Webb understands this better than anybody alive. He's tried to explain it to me. But if the price of something goes up, then you substitute something else for it that is cheaper. And it commonly, you know, some of the things are steak to chicken, that kind of thing. The question that I was asked at a governor's conference, well, does that mean, and I know it's facetious, but I think it's going to, people here in Washington need to understand how absurd this can sound and what a hard sell it's going to be. I'm asked, okay, the price of beef goes up, so instead of measuring that increase, they're going to tell us, in Washington, they're going to tell us here in Montana that we should buy chicken. So if the price of chicken goes up, are they going to tell us to buy cat food? And if the price of the fancy treats cat food goes up, are we going to be told to buy the generic cat food? This is kind of the way people are thinking how this might apply and how ridiculous it is. Another man said, well, does that mean if the price of gasoline goes up, the substitution will be public transportation? They'll tell us to take the bus. And then if the price of the bus fare goes up, are they going to tell us, well, you could walk? So this is a kind of process, thought process, that I think people here in D.C. that are making these decisions need to think about. They need to think about how it's going to look. It's not going to look very pretty. Thank you.